The Alpha King hated the Omega for betraying him, but the truth brought him to his knees. What kind of truth could completely change the heart of someone consumed by hatred? And how could a single revelation force even an Alpha King to face everything he believed? If unforgettable stories of love, loyalty, and destiny keep you coming back, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, if someone you trusted seemed to betray you, would you seek revenge or wait for the truth? Now, let the gates of an ancient kingdom open as a story of trust, loss, and hidden truth quietly begins. The cruelest lies are the ones your own eyes convince you to believe. A cold autumn rain drifted over the towering walls of Blackmore Castle, turning the ancient stone courtyards into mirrors that reflected a restless gray sky. Long before sunrise, the fortress had already awakened to the sounds of armored guards changing shifts, servants carrying lanterns through narrow hallways, and distant wolves calling from the pine forests beyond the northern cliffs. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm of another royal morning, something invisible had begun to unravel. Alpha King Nathaniel Brooks stood alone on the highest balcony of the western tower, his silver eyes fixed on the kingdom stretching beyond the castle gates. For years he had defended Blackmore through wisdom instead of fear, earning the loyalty of every allied pack by believing that trust was stronger than suspicion. Beside him for nearly all those years had been Claire Bennett, the gentle Omega whose quiet kindness had slowly become part of the castle itself. She remembered every servant's name, visited wounded patrols after dangerous missions, and somehow made even the coldest halls feel warmer simply by walking through them with her calm smile. Most people believed the Alpha King protected the kingdom. Few realized the Omega had quietly protected the heart of its king. That morning, however, Nathaniel noticed something that had never happened before. Claire crossed the lower courtyard wearing a dark traveling cloak instead of her usual pale blue one. She moved carefully, glancing over her shoulder only once before disappearing through a side passage that led toward the abandoned eastern gate, a place rarely used except for supply wagons during harsh winters. Curiosity settled uneasily inside him. Claire had never hidden anything from him. Without calling for guards or announcing his presence, Nathaniel quietly followed from the castle walls above, keeping enough distance that she would never sense he was watching. The rain grew heavier as she reached the old gate, where a hooded stranger waited beside a weathered oak tree. The figure carried a small wooden chest wrapped in black cloth and bound with a silver cord bearing the royal crest. Nathaniel felt his heartbeat slow. That crest marked the kingdom's most closely guarded state records, documents known only to the royal council and the king himself. Hidden behind the stone battlements, he watched Claire step toward the stranger. She accepted the wooden chest with trembling hands, closed her eyes for a brief moment as though gathering courage, then carefully handed another nearly identical chest back in return. The stranger disappeared into the mist without a single word. Claire remained standing alone beneath the rain, holding the remaining chest tightly against her heart. Even from a distance, Nathaniel could see tears glistening across her cheeks before she quickly brushed them away and walked toward the forest path beyond the castle walls instead of returning home. His thoughts raced faster than reason could restrain them. The royal crest. A secret exchange. Leaving without explanation. Every piece seemed to fit together into one devastating picture. The trust he had spent years building inside his heart cracked beneath what his own eyes insisted they had witnessed. He wanted to call her name. He wanted to demand an explanation. Instead, frozen between disbelief and anger, he watched the woman he believed he knew disappear into the thick morning fog, unaware that the truth had already begun slipping beyond his reach with every step she took. The cold rain continued long after Claire disappeared into the forest, but Nathaniel remained motionless upon the ancient battlements, his gaze fixed on the empty trail where she had vanished only moments before. Every instinct inside him urged him to run after her, to demand an explanation, to believe there had to be another reason for what he had witnessed. Yet another voice, colder and far less forgiving, whispered that the truth had already revealed itself. The royal crest had not been forged or copied. The secret chest had not been imagined. His own eyes had watched the exchange. By the time Nathaniel returned to the council chamber, word had already spread that one of the kingdom's protected archives had been opened before dawn. Members of the royal council gathered around the circular stone table, their expressions tense as reports arrived from the eastern border. A patrol captain stepped forward carrying a damp leather satchel recovered near the abandoned gate. Inside lay an empty cloth bearing the same silver royal seal Nathaniel had seen only an hour earlier. Silence settled across the chamber. No one dared to speak first. Finally, the oldest council member lowered his head. "Your Majesty, if confidential records have fallen into unknown hands, every allied pack could be placed at risk." Nathaniel looked toward the rain-covered windows, saying nothing. His heart refused to accept what his mind had already concluded. Before another advisor could continue, the heavy wooden doors slowly opened. Claire stepped quietly into the chamber, still wearing the same dark cloak, raindrops glistening across its folded hood. Every conversation immediately stopped. She looked around the room, sensing the unusual stillness before her eyes finally met Nathaniel's. For just a brief moment, confusion crossed her gentle face. Then she noticed the empty cloth resting upon the council table. Something inside her seemed to sink. Nathaniel descended the steps toward her with measured calm that frightened even the advisors who had served beside him for decades. His voice remained controlled, almost painfully quiet. "Where have you been?" Claire lowered her eyes before answering. "Outside the castle." Nathaniel waited. She offered nothing more. "Who was waiting for you at the eastern gate?" His question echoed through the silent chamber. Claire closed her eyes for only a heartbeat before looking back at him. She did not deny meeting anyone. She did not invent another story. Instead, she whispered, "I cannot answer that." A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. Nathaniel felt something inside him fracture. "Cannot," he repeated softly, "or will not." Claire remained silent. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her cloak, but her expression stayed calm despite the growing tension surrounding her. She looked directly at Nathaniel, and for one impossible moment, he searched her eyes for the certainty that had guided him through countless difficult years. Instead, he found only quiet sorrow. The absence of an explanation hurt more than any confession could have. The council members exchanged uneasy glances while distant thunder rolled above the castle towers. At last Nathaniel spoke again, each word carrying the unbearable weight of trust collapsing beneath unanswered questions. "Until the truth is known, you are relieved of every royal duty." Claire neither protested nor pleaded. She simply bowed her head with quiet dignity. "I understand," she answered. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the great chamber doors.
No tears. No anger.
No attempt to defend herself. Nathaniel watched her disappear into the long stone corridor, believing she had chosen silence over loyalty, never realizing that the greatest act of devotion sometimes looks exactly like betrayal to the person it was meant to protect. By nightfall, every corner of Blackmore Castle seemed colder than the autumn wind outside its walls. The servants who once greeted Claire with warm smiles now lowered their eyes whenever her name was whispered. Guards who had stood beside her during festivals suddenly spoke only in careful silence. Rumors moved through the corridors faster than truth ever could. Some believed she had sold the kingdom's secrets. Others insisted she had fled with a hidden ally before changing her mind and returning. None of them knew what had truly happened, and Claire made no effort to change their minds. She quietly gathered her belongings from the small chamber she had occupied for years, folding each dress with the same gentle care she gave everything else in life. A faded blue cloak rested neatly beside a stack of books she had once read to children visiting the castle library. She paused for a moment, her fingers lingering on the worn leather cover of her favorite storybook before placing it carefully into a wooden chest. Outside her window, the first lanterns illuminated the castle gardens where she had planted white roses every spring. The flowers still swayed peacefully beneath the evening breeze, untouched by the storm that had suddenly changed her life. A soft knock came at the door. It was Margaret, the elderly housekeeper who had served 3 generations of kings. Her kind eyes shimmered with quiet sadness. Child, she whispered, stepping inside, tell me this is all a terrible mistake. Claire offered the same gentle smile she always had, though it carried a quiet exhaustion Margaret had never seen before. Some truths cannot be spoken yet, she answered softly. Margaret reached for her hands. Then let someone stand beside you. Claire slowly shook her head. The fewer people who know, the safer everyone will be. The older woman searched her face, hoping to find anger or fear, but found only calm determination. She embraced Claire tightly before leaving without another question. Much later that evening, Nathaniel wandered alone through the western corridor, where portraits of former Alpha Kings lined the stone walls. Every painting celebrated courage, loyalty, and sacrifice, yet none prepared him for the emptiness echoing through the castle tonight. As he passed the library, he noticed the reading room standing unusually quiet. No children laughed beside the fireplace. No warm voice drifted between the bookshelves. He walked farther until he reached the eastern garden, where rows of white roses glowed beneath the moonlight. The flowers looked exactly as they always had, yet the place somehow felt abandoned. He realized, almost unwillingly, that he had never noticed how many quiet moments inside Blackmore Castle had always included Claire. The following morning, the Royal Council formally announced that Claire Bennet had been removed from every position within the palace until further notice. No trial, no public accusation, only silence. Standing near the castle gates with a single traveling bag resting beside her feet, Claire turned once to look at the towering fortress that had been her home for so many years. Sunlight touched the highest tower, where Nathaniel often watched over the kingdom. She wondered if he was standing there now. She hoped he was not. Taking one slow breath, she pulled her blue cloak tightly around her shoulders and walked toward the forest road without looking back, carrying with her a secret that would protect the kingdom but leave her own name buried beneath the weight of betrayal. 3 years passed, and Blackmore Kingdom became stronger than it had ever been. The borders remained secure, the harvests were plentiful, and every neighboring alpha respected Nathaniel Brooks as a wise and unshakable ruler. The people praised his discipline, believing their king had sacrificed his own happiness to protect the realm from betrayal. Songs were written about his strength. Statues were carved in his honor. Yet none of those victories ever reached the quiet emptiness that waited for him inside Blackmore Castle every evening. The grand halls remained magnificent, but something invisible had vanished the day Claire walked away through the eastern gate. The library no longer echoed with children laughing over old storybooks. The eastern garden still bloomed each spring, yet the white roses somehow seemed less vibrant than before. Even the servants carried out their duties with careful efficiency rather than quiet joy. Nathaniel noticed every change, but never allowed himself to speak of it. Instead, he buried himself deeper in royal responsibilities, believing work would eventually silence memories. It never did. Every morning before sunrise, he reviewed military reports, settled disputes between neighboring pacts, and signed decrees that shaped the future of thousands. Every evening, he returned to chambers that felt larger and colder than they once had. Sometimes he found himself stopping outside rooms Claire had once visited every day. The old library, the greenhouse, the western kitchen where she always insisted on thanking every cook personally before meals were served. He never entered those places for long. They reminded him too much of the life he believed she had willingly abandoned. Meanwhile, far beyond the northern forests where royal banners could no longer be seen, Claire quietly built a different life in a small mountain village called Pine Hollow. The villagers knew nothing about palaces or royal councils. To them, she was simply the gentle young woman who helped repair broken fences after storms, cared for elderly neighbors, taught children to read beneath an old maple tree, and comforted frightened travelers who arrived during harsh winters. She never spoke of Blackmore Castle. She never mentioned the Alpha King. The only reminder of her former life was a small silver pendant hidden beneath her simple blue dress, resting close to her heart where no one else could see it. Whenever villagers thanked her for her kindness, she smiled warmly but never stayed long enough to receive praise. She believed some promises were meant to remain silent forever. One crisp autumn afternoon, an elderly traveler arrived at Pine Hollow exhausted from a long journey through the mountains. Claire welcomed him into the village without hesitation, offering warm soup and a place beside the fire. The old man studied her carefully throughout the evening, his expression growing increasingly thoughtful. Before sunrise the next morning, he quietly asked, "Have we met before?" Claire's gentle smile never changed. "I do not believe so." The traveler nodded politely, but as he prepared to leave, he looked back one final time. "You remind me of someone whose name people in Blackmore no longer speak." Claire remained standing in the doorway, watching the morning mist roll gently across the hills. She said nothing until the traveler disappeared beyond the winding road. Only then did she close her eyes and whisper so softly that even the wind nearly carried the words away. "That is probably for the best." Far away inside Blackmore Castle, Nathaniel stood before the tallest window in the western tower, looking toward the same distant mountains without realizing that beyond those quiet forests lived the one person he had spent 3 years trying to forget and somehow had never truly left behind. Late one winter afternoon, an unexpected bell echoed through Blackmore Castle, announcing the arrival of a funeral procession. Lord Edwin Hawthorne, the oldest captain of the Royal Guard, had passed away peacefully after serving the kingdom for more than 50 years. Nathaniel stood quietly among the gathered nobles as the old captain's weathered sword was placed upon a white cloth beside his portrait. Edwin had served Nathaniel's father, had witnessed Nathaniel's coronation, and had remained loyally at his king's side through every triumph and every hardship. After the ceremony ended, the captain's granddaughter approached the throne carrying a small wooden box polished smooth with age. "My grandfather asked me to give this only to you," she whispered. Nathaniel accepted the box with respectful curiosity. There was no royal seal upon it, only Edwin's family crest carved into the lid. That evening, alone inside his private study, Nathaniel carefully opened the old container. Inside rested a faded leather journal, several folded letters, and a silver key wrapped in blue ribbon. The first pages of the journal contained ordinary records of patrols and border reports. Then one entry immediately caught his attention. The date matched the very morning Claire had disappeared from Blackmore Castle. Nathaniel slowly continued reading. Edwin described receiving secret orders from the royal oracle before dawn, instructing him to escort an unidentified courier through the eastern gate without allowing anyone else to interfere. Nathaniel frowned. He had never issued such an order. The next page made his heartbeat quicken. Edwin wrote that the courier had not been delivering the kingdom's real archives at all. Instead, Claire had personally carried a carefully crafted duplicate chest filled with meaningless documents designed to deceive an unknown spy hidden somewhere inside the royal court. The genuine records had already been secured elsewhere hours earlier. Nathaniel stared at the words, convinced he had misunderstood them. He turned the page again. Edwin explained that Claire had volunteered to carry the false chest because the true traitor within the castle believed only she could gain access to the royal archives without suspicion. If anyone questioned her actions, she had been ordered never to reveal the operation until every conspirator had exposed themselves. The mission depended entirely upon convincing everyone, including the king himself, that she had betrayed Blackmore. Nathaniel's hands began to tremble. He searched desperately through the remaining papers until he found one final sealed envelope addressed in Claire's familiar handwriting. The seal had never been broken. Slowly, he unfolded the letter. "Your Majesty, if you are reading this, then Lord Edwin believed the kingdom is finally safe enough for the truth to be known.
I do not know how long that will take.
Perhaps months. Perhaps years. Please do not blame yourself for believing what you saw. I ask the oracle to tell you nothing because if even your eyes showed doubt, the real enemy would know the plan had failed. The easiest person to deceive is the one protecting what they love most. If my name must carry the weight of betrayal so Blackmore survives, then I accept that burden willingly. I only pray that one day you will understand why I could never defend myself." Nathaniel lowered the letter as complete silence filled the room. Every memory returned with painful clarity. Claire refusing to explain. Claire accepting every accusation without resistance. Claire walking away, without asking to be believed. None of it had been guilt. It had been sacrifice. The hatred he had carried for 3 long years suddenly collapsed beneath a truth he had never imagined, and for the first time since the day she left Blackmore Castle, the Alpha King realized the only person who had never betrayed him was the woman he had condemned with his own silence. The letter remained open on Nathaniel's desk until dawn, though he had read every line so many times that he no longer needed the words before him. Outside the windows of his private study, the first snowfall of winter covered Blackmore Castle in quiet white, softening the ancient walls that had witnessed 3 years of silence built upon a single misunderstanding. Nathaniel had faced rival alphas without fear, negotiated peace between hostile packs, and accepted every burden the crown demanded of him, yet nothing had prepared him for the unbearable realization that the woman he had judged most harshly had been protecting both him and the kingdom from the very beginning. As morning light slowly filled the chamber, he summoned the royal oracle. The elderly woman entered without surprise, as though she had known this day would eventually arrive. Nathaniel placed Claire's letter upon the table between them. "You knew," he said quietly. The oracle lowered her eyes before answering. "I did." There was no denial, only deep sorrow. "Then why did you allow me to believe she had betrayed us?" Nathaniel asked, his voice carrying more pain than anger. The oracle remained silent for a long moment before speaking. "Because Claire insisted that if you knew the truth, your heart would betray the mission before your words ever could. She believed the enemies hidden within the court watched you more closely than anyone else. If they saw even a moment of hesitation, every sacrifice would have been wasted." Nathaniel slowly sat down, overwhelmed by memories he now understood in a completely different light. Claire had never defended herself because every accusation made the deception more believable. She had accepted exile because returning would have endangered everything she had worked to protect. Even her final look before leaving the castle had not been one of guilt, but quiet hope that one day he would discover the truth without anyone else paying the price. Nathaniel closed his eyes, remembering every cold word he had spoken, every moment he had chosen silence instead of trust. The oracle stepped closer and gently rested one weathered hand upon the edge of the table. "She never blamed you," she whispered. Even after leaving Blackmore, every message she secretly sent through trusted channels asked only one question: is the king safe? Nathaniel could no longer hide the grief rising inside him. The castle suddenly felt unfamiliar, every room reminding him not of betrayal, but of kindness he had failed to recognize until it was gone. Later that afternoon, he walked alone through the eastern garden where white roses still bloomed despite the winter frost. He knelt beside the oldest rose bush Claire had planted years before and gently brushed fresh snow from its blossoms. The flowers had survived every season because someone had cared for them long before they ever opened. Nathaniel finally understood that love often worked the same way. It revealed its deepest roots only after absence exposed everything it had quietly sustained. Rising slowly to his feet, he looked toward the distant northern mountains stretching beyond Blackmore's borders. Somewhere beyond those forests lived the woman who had sacrificed her own name so his kingdom could endure. The Alpha King, who had once believed he needed justice, now wanted only one thing. Not another victory. Not another crown. Not another triumph remembered by history. He needed the chance to stand before Claire Bennett, look into her eyes without the blindness of pride, and ask for the forgiveness he knew he had done nothing to deserve. Nathaniel left Blackmore Castle before sunrise with no royal procession, no banners, and no escort announcing the journey of a king. He wore a simple dark traveling coat instead of ceremonial robes, carrying only a weathered satchel, a map marked with quiet villages beyond the northern forests, and the folded letter that had changed everything. For the first time since ascending the throne, he crossed the castle gates not as a ruler inspecting his lands, but as a man searching for the person he had failed the most. Snow covered the mountain roads in a peaceful blanket of white, while cold morning light stretched across endless pine forests. Every mile carried memories he had spent years trying to bury. He remembered Claire laughing softly as village children decorated the castle gardens every spring. He remembered her habit of thanking every servant by name, no matter how busy the day became. He remembered countless evenings when she had quietly waited with warm tea after exhausting council meetings, never asking for recognition, never expecting gratitude. Those memories no longer comforted him. They reminded him of everything he had mistaken for ordinary until it disappeared. Several days later, Nathaniel reached Pine Hollow just as golden afternoon sunlight settled over the small mountain village. Smoke curled peacefully from stone chimneys, children chased one another through fresh snow, and neighbors greeted each passing traveler with genuine warmth. The village possessed no towering walls or grand halls, yet an unmistakable sense of peace filled every narrow street. As Nathaniel slowly walked through the marketplace, he noticed something unexpected. Nearly every person he met spoke fondly of the same young woman. An elderly baker smiled while describing how she delivered warm bread to families whenever winter storms blocked the roads. A carpenter quietly explained that she spent evenings reading stories to children whose parents worked late into the night. A widowed grandmother simply looked toward the small village school and whispered. She arrived carrying sadness in her eyes, yet somehow she spent every day giving hope to everyone else. Nathaniel felt his heart grow heavier with every conversation. Not one person described Claire as someone broken by exile. Instead, they described a woman who had transformed quiet kindness into a way of life wherever she went. As the sun slowly lowered behind the mountains, he followed the sound of children laughing toward a modest wooden schoolhouse beside a frozen creek. Through the open doorway, he finally saw her. Claire stood beside a chalkboard, patiently helping several young students practice reading while soft winter light surrounded the room. She wore the same simple blue dress beneath a warm knitted shawl, her chestnut hair gathered loosely behind her shoulders exactly as he remembered. The children looked at her with complete trust, laughing whenever she gently encouraged them after small mistakes. Nathaniel remained motionless outside the doorway, unable to take another step. 3 years had changed many things, yet the quiet warmth that surrounded Claire remained untouched. She looked healthier than he had imagined, peaceful in a way he had never allowed her to be inside the burdens of royal life. At that moment, one of the children noticed the stranger standing outside and happily waved toward him. Claire turned instinctively to see who had arrived. Her blue eyes met Nathaniel's across the quiet classroom. Time itself seemed to stop between them. Surprise crossed her face first, followed by quiet disbelief. Yet there was no anger in her expression.
No bitterness.
Only a silence filled with 3 years of unanswered words, standing patiently between the Alpha King and the Omega, whose greatest act of loyalty had been mistaken for betrayal. The children quietly gathered their books and hurried outside after sensing that the 2 adults standing silently across the classroom needed a moment that belonged only to them. As the wooden door gently closed behind the last child, the little schoolhouse became almost perfectly still. Snowflakes drifted slowly beyond the windows while the fire crackled softly inside the stone fireplace. Claire remained standing beside the old chalkboard, her hands folded calmly before her, studying Nathaniel with the same gentle eyes he had remembered every day for the past 3 years. Neither of them spoke immediately. Some silences carried too much history to be broken quickly. Nathaniel finally stepped forward, stopping several feet away as though afraid he had already crossed too many boundaries in the past. "I know the truth," he whispered. Claire's expression softened, but she showed no surprise. Instead, she slowly lowered her eyes for a brief moment before looking back at him. "Lord Edwin waited until it was safe," she said quietly. "It was not a question." Nathaniel nodded once. "He left me everything. His journal, your letter, every detail." Claire released a slow breath that seemed to carry away a burden she had held for years. "Then Blackmore truly is safe." Nathaniel felt those simple words strike deeper than anything else she could have said. Even now, after everything she had endured, her first concern remained the kingdom rather than herself. He struggled to understand how someone could carry such kindness without allowing bitterness to take its place. "Why did you never come back?" he asked. Claire smiled gently, though sadness rested behind it. "What reason would I have given? If I returned too soon, questions would begin again. The people needed to believe the story they had accepted until every hidden danger had disappeared. Once enough time had passed, they no longer needed me. They had peace. Nathaniel slowly shook his head. I needed you. The words escaped before he could stop them. Claire looked at him quietly, her blue eyes searching his face with calm honesty. No, she answered softly. You needed a king who could lead without hesitation. That was always more important than what either of us wanted. Nathaniel lowered his gaze, unable to deny the painful truth hidden within her answer. I failed you, he admitted. The moment I stopped asking questions and started believing only what I saw, I failed the one person who had never stopped protecting me. Claire took one slow step closer, her voice remaining gentle but steady. You believed what anyone would have believed. That was the entire reason the plan worked. Nathaniel looked into her eyes, desperate to understand how forgiveness could exist so naturally inside someone who had every reason to withhold it. Do you hate me? He asked quietly. Claire's expression filled with genuine surprise before she softly shook her head. Hate is far too heavy to carry for 3 years. I chose to leave it behind long ago. Those words left Nathaniel standing in complete silence. He realized that while he had spent years carrying anger born from misunderstanding, Claire had quietly chosen peace instead. The difference between them had never been strength. It had always been grace. Outside, the last rays of afternoon sunlight settled across the snow-covered village, casting warm golden light through the classroom windows. Nathaniel understood that discovering the truth had been only the beginning. Forgiveness was not something he could ask for in a single conversation. It was something he would have to earn, one quiet act of humility at a time, just as Claire had earned the love of everyone whose lives she had touched without ever asking for anything in return. The next morning, the entire village gathered in a small square to celebrate the first snowfall of the season. Children hung handmade lanterns from old pine trees while neighbors shared warm bread, fresh cider, and quiet laughter beneath strings of glowing lights. Nathaniel remained among them without revealing his title, helping an elderly carpenter carry heavy bundles of firewood and repairing wooden benches beside the village school. No one treated him like a king. They simply thanked him as another willing pair of hands. Claire watched from a distance, saying little but noticing every quiet act. He never asked anyone to admire him. He never mentioned Blackmore. He never spoke about forgiveness. Day after day, he simply chose humility where pride had once ruled. As the village festival reached its peaceful end, the children invited Claire to stand beneath the oldest maple tree so everyone could thank her for another year of kindness. She smiled shyly as neighbors applauded the woman who had become the heart of Pine Hollow without ever asking for recognition. Nathaniel quietly stepped forward through the gathering crowd until he stood only a few feet away from her. The laughter slowly faded as the villagers sensed the importance of the moment unfolding before them. Nathaniel looked into Claire's eyes, no longer seeing the woman he believed had betrayed him years ago, but the one person who had quietly sacrificed everything so others could continue living in peace. Without speaking another word, he slowly lowered himself onto one knee in the fresh snow. Gasps rippled gently through the crowd. No one had ever seen a man bow before Claire, much less someone they had only known as a quiet traveler. Nathaniel lowered his head. I cannot change the pain my choices caused, he said softly. I cannot return the years you carried a burden that should never have been yours alone. I believed my eyes instead of the heart I trusted for so many years. For that, I will be sorry for the rest of my life. I am not asking you to erase the past. I am only asking for the chance to spend whatever years remain proving that I finally understand the truth you protected at such great cost. The village square became completely silent except for the gentle whisper of falling snow. Claire looked at the man kneeling before her, no longer seeing only the Alpha King who had judged her, but also the man who had traveled across mountains without his crown simply to admit he had been wrong. Slowly, she stepped closer and offered him her hand. Nathaniel looked up with quiet uncertainty before accepting it. Claire smiled through eyes glistening with emotion. The truth did not bring you here, she whispered. The choice to face it did. She gently helped him rise to his feet, and for the first time in many years, both of them stood side by side without silence, separating their hearts. Weeks later, Blackmore Castle welcomed two familiar figures returning through its ancient gates, not because duty demanded it, but because they had freely chosen to walk the same road again. The white roses in the eastern garden bloomed brighter than anyone could remember. Children once again filled the library with laughter, and servants smiled as warmth quietly returned to halls that had long forgotten it. The kingdom had been saved years before by one silent sacrifice, but its heart was restored only when truth, humility, and forgiveness finally found their way home together.